big changes are coming to Victoria 3, and with time cards below, let's jump straight in and take a look at them. In the first tranche 1.4, we have Convoy rating revisions. Convoy rating has been more impactful on the long-term economic health of your supply network, as the time it takes to recover sunk convoys now scales properly against both damaged shipping lanes and the overall number of convoys that you're producing. However, defending against raiders has also been made more reliable, with the introduction of a shielding effect where admirals with escort convoy orders now directly reduce the number of convoys sunk during attacks by an amount relative to their fleet's defensive combat effectiveness. Nice to see a little change there, adding some more relevance to the Navy. I think Victoria 3 could do a lot more than just that, but nonetheless, a relatively easy change to sort of work us into this video. I think they do get spicier as they move through, particularly, spoiler alert, in the second tranche. The goods substitution system, say that 5 times fast, has received a facelift. Nice for them and modders, but they've also taken the time in-game to tweak a bunch of the weights of goods to make certain goods more in demand. So they're increasing demand for certain things. The examples they give are meat and fish, as well as oil for heating, particularly in the early game. Much like me, a quickie but a goodie, subject independence wars. A much requested fix, absolutely, to independence wars means that subjects now that are fighting for their freedom won't continue to pay their taxes or stay inside of the market of their overlord. This one just makes sense. And a change to the imperialist AI rounds out our update 1.4 tranche. The AI of imperialist colonial powers is more inclined to go on certain overseas adventures, like opening up Japan's market, and is less inclined to support unrecognized powers against the aggressions of fellow imperialists unless they really have a strong reason for doing so, like an alliance or a desire to seize the land for themselves. Now moving on to update 1.5 tranche. These will come later, and again we'll talk about what we know and speculate a little bit about what we don't when they'll be releasing at the end of the video. First change is shared fronts. Adjacent fronts belonging to the same side in a diplomatic play, i.e. one side of the war, not just one nation, will now act as a united front. So it's one big-ass long front, reducing the number of fronts to manage in conflicts with multiple participants. Makes sense. It means that, for example, a war in pre-unification Germany, this is the example they give anyway, will not devolve into a dozen or more tiny fronts due to numerous participants. To balance that out, though, they've added this multiple simultaneous battles per front. So while all of the fronts may merge together into one behemoth of a front, to compensate for that fact, each advancing general along the front will be able to start a battle if the front is long enough, despite one battle already being fought. So what do you know, everybody? There can be multiple battles along a front line. This is a good change to the military system in Victoria 3. It's not the only change that we'll hear about that's impacting the military. At the end, actually, there's a banger that's just focused on military, but nice to see it nonetheless. Reverse sways in diplomatic plays, a long-awaited feature, absolutely. Will let a potential participant name their own price for joining a side in a diplomatic play instead of having to rely on leaders of the play guessing at what they want. Nice. All sways, such as war goals or obligations, are also valid for reverse swaying. This is a really important part of bargaining, of swaying before conflict. And as we'll hear about with the next two things, there are some additional changes that are going to support this as well. The first additional change, call an ally in diplomatic plays, is kind of what you see is what you get on the tin with this one. Countries that can be called into wars, like subjects or allies, are no longer automatically required. They no longer automatically join every diplomatic play that they could be called into. And instead, the primary participant has to explicitly call them in, costing them maneuvers. And of course, if you run out of maneuvers, you won't be able to pull additional people into the fight. Maybe you won't be able to add more primary war goals, all sorts of things that you'll be limited to. This is a big change, and potentially, thinking a little bit outside the box, this will help to, not far outside the box, granted, this will help to, painting myself like some kind of genius. It's fairly obvious, actually, what I'm about to say, and now I've baited you for so long, maybe I just won't say it. No. Look, the idea, I think, is to restrict world wars and these massive conflicts from erupting out of nothing because Luxembourg gets a little bit shirty with Belgium or something. or some power down in Africa pulls Britain, and then Britain being pulled on one side causes France to jump in on the other, and then all of a sudden you've got a world war, and people's allies are jumping in as well. It's all kind of craziness, and I think it will help to reduce that a little bit. Long rambles aside, the last part of the sort of triple threat diplomatic package is new sways. There are numerous new sways on offer to offer or request in diplomatic place, including offering or asking for subjects and states to be transferred. Transfer states, thank goodness. And diplomatic deals, like bankrolling or joining a customs union. As you can see, you can ask for diplomatic pacts, ask for transfer states, ask to become a subject, ask for war goals or obligations to offer up your support in a conflict. Next up, an interesting way to the way that the economy works in Victoria 3, potentially requiring us to do a little bit more planning around individual regions of our nation. Goods production and consumption will now always have a local effect, no matter how good the market access. It leads to synergies, like having a steel mill in the same estate as your coal and iron mines makes for more profitable operations for all three buildings, rather than being distributed across all over the nation. On the other hand, building a textile mill in a state with cotton plantations, but not very many people to buy the luxury clothes that might be produced, might be worse for the textile mill than building it in a major population centre with loads of demand. So there will be some intricacies that we might need to think about. The level of this effect is, of course, at this stage unknown, so it's unclear how much of an impact this will have. Another quick one, several buildings have had select functions split off into dedicated buildings, and new production methods have been added and rebalanced. The end result, they say, is to make it easier for us to balance our economy without always having to use trade to export excess production. The example that they give is that vineyards have been split away from grain farms and turned into their own building type. This makes sense. And we end with two that are more military focused. Firstly, retreat and pursuit. Battles that are all but decided will now conclude more rapidly through special battle conditions instead of dragging on and on pointlessly for weeks on end. More disciplined generals will be able to organize more controlled, less damaging retreats. Nice that these things won't linger on and on for too long. Military formations for armies and fleets is the final element on our list before we talk about when all of this is hitting our screens. They say that it will be a major revision to how we manage and organize our armed forces to give us more intuitive control both before and during active warfare, while still retaining the option to let wars play out on their own if we desire, or potentially we're required. It's unclear. As they mentioned in the beginning of the dev diary, among many other things, this will revise how mobilization and conscripts work currently, making both conscription and early demobilization more intuitive and less frustrating. And as a caveat, there was an introductory part at the start of the dev diary. It talked about some changes that have already been made to the military in the most recent update. It also talked a little bit about how the conscription of troops can lead to a long bleed, and it would be nice to be able to send them home in future. Now let's talk about what they've said about when we can actually expect this stuff. Firstly, at the very start of the dev diary, they mentioned that in 1.4 we'll be releasing in quarter 3. We are currently in June, so quarter 3 begins in July. So that's July, August, September. And then we can expect the second lot of changes, 1.5 update, to be in quarter 4, obviously the last 3 months of the year. I suspect, and from what we're about to say, I hope you might agree with me, that this update, 1.4, releasing in quarter 3, is likely to be around the start of September, or potentially just September. Let's move through and see what else we know. Well, one other curious thing is that the open beta for the second tranche of changes, shared fronts, reverse sways, all those new sways from update 1.5 is going to launch at the same time as the official update for 1.4 comes out. So the official update for 1.4 will come out, all those changes, and on the same day, in fact, at the exact same second, allegedly, then the open beta for update 1.5 will release at the same time. There's going to be a lot of stuff floating about on that day. Again, theorizing it could be, let's say, September 2nd, just to throw a date out there. I haven't even looked at what day of the week that is. It's probably doesn't even align with the normal schedule. Moving along though, a lot of stuff's going to roll out on that day. We know it's going to be in Q3. Any other clues here? Well, yes, kind of. Yes, with an asterisk. There's one around timing. So the military formations thing that we talked about at the end, the last improvement, they say are currently in very active development. And they expect it to receive a lot of iteration and polish over the course of that open beta that we just talked about. They then go on to say that we'll learn much more about this in later dev diaries, the first of which we can expect on August 10th. And that's because, as they reveal right at the end, they're going on summer break for 6 weeks. I'm not going to lie, being in the Southern Hemisphere, I am jealous of your Northern Hemisphere summer right now. 6 weeks is a huge break too. So naturally, this video series will also be taking a break for at least 6 weeks. Our viewership has been lower recently. There's certainly less interest in Victoria 3. I've seen it in trend data and other data as well, but also releasing around September, I believe, is the next paid DLC for Victoria 3. I remember they revealed two, from memory, it was going to be September and then March would be when these two paid DLCs would release. Maybe this, the 1.4, the open beta, will coincide with that. And that's why I lean towards September. Either way, let me know what you think below. Some big changes coming. Military formations might be the most important one of all. Probably one of the things that people complained about the most when Victoria 3 came out. So it'll be interesting to see how they tackle that as the year progresses. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.